And welcome to Picks on Politics, everybody. I am Dan Manarino in a very busy week, specifically in Jersey City. From ICE agents detaining people in the streets to a major budget gap that could drastically impact how new Mayor James Solomon makes decisions for the city. That deficit totaling $250 million, more than a quarter of the city's entire budget. Mayor Solomon placing the blame on his predecessor, alleging mismanagement of funds in several areas, including unpaid medical bills, consultation for a scrap museum, and unpaid city contracts. So the question here is, how does Jersey City get out of this giant hole? Mayor James Solomon going on the record. Mr. Mayor, welcome back to Picks on Politics. Good to see you.
Dan, great to see you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the budget, right? Because you highlight many reasons for the city seeing this massive deficit, which, by the way, is 6 times greater than the one that New York City is facing, right? And you're blaming Stephen Fulop for this. Now, I wanted to, I guess, kind of look for the explanations as to why you are in this bind to begin with. What are the main contributing factors?
Yeah, so a couple of core things. The first is gimmicks. Instead of, taking responsible decisions, making responsible actions, the former mayor used one-time tricks. So, for example, he emptied out our entire rainy day fund, $100 million, during a period of relative economic prosperity. Second was, we believe, intentional undercounting and under-budgeting of our healthcare costs. Getting into office, looking through the books, we found $52 million in healthcare bills that simply hadn't been paid. And because of that, we were paying late fees to the tune of $1 million a year to some of our healthcare providers. You add all those things together, and it gets to, one of the largest deficits in the country, over $250 million, 28% of our budget.
Mr. Fulop was here last week, and he was placing the blame on, saying that all mayors kind of place the blame on prior administrations. I was talking to him about snow removal, but he was saying, you know what, this is not something new, that a new mayor comes on board and blames their predecessor. What do you have to say to that?
This is of a different scope and scale of what mayors across the country are dealing with. Very few cities have a budget deficit that is, again, as you said, more than a quarter of their city. And again, there are decisions that are made that were known, but when you find $52 million of unpaid bills, that is a level of deception that is deeply concerning and completely different from the usual things that happen during transitions. We also found, real vanity. Over $20 million were spent on consultants for a museum that never showed up, and then we never had a plan to build. One consultant got $7.5 million. Can you imagine getting $7.5 million to, in essence, do nothing?
Mr. Fulop also, in a news statement, pointed out that passing a city budget plan isn't just the sole responsibility of a mayor, but it's that of the city council. And he says you were on that city council and were aware of these issues over the years. So do you take any responsibility being on the council and seeing the budgets as they came through?
Yeah, it's important to kind of set the record straight.
Yeah.
I was on the council for 8 years, and all 8 years I voted against his budgets. And when I voted against them, I said specifically I was voting against them because of these gimmicks, because I could see he was kicking the can down the road and putting things on the credit card. I specifically called out selling over 1,000 city properties and using the proceeds to just plug budget holes. So next year you got to sell more land, which is not a sustainable solution. But I wish I had done more. I wish I had been more vocal, found a way to get my colleagues to vote no so that we could actually build sustainable budgets.
Okay, so you always voted no, but your colleagues didn't, and that's why they're...
Correct, all 8 years.
Well, let's talk solutions then, Mayor, right? How do you go about closing such a massive gap? Now, I had Mayor Mamdani on, and he was talking about looking at ways to save in city agencies. You said you'll be taking $1 salary, but that's a small portion in terms of $250 million.
Correct. We're going to do everything. Obviously, taking a salary is one step. I think it's important to lead by example. We've already taken a step to change our healthcare third-party administrator. That's going to get the city $30 million less in expenditures. But for $250 million, you need a 5-year plan. We can't kick the can down the road. We can't find one-year fixes. We need a plan to get the city back to sustainable, stable financial practices, and that's going to require a partnership with the state. So we are going to work with the governor, with the legislature, with our state delegation, and come up with that sustainable plan. And our commitment is to make sure that we get our city back on track. That's why we've just been so transparent.
Yeah.
When we, again, to the former mayor, we released the numbers. If there's any number someone disagrees with, go look at the budget. It's all there. It's all for the public to inspect and explore.
But in reality, I've asked you many times if you're going to raise taxes, and you said you would look at that and maybe have to. Does this mean you have to?
So we have always said my commitment and my promise was to deliver stable property taxes to the residents of Jersey City. And that is the commitment and promise over the next 4 years. I obviously can't make any specific promises today because we have said again, we have to be honest. Every option is on the table for what we can do to get through this. But know that the people of Jersey City have seen their property taxes go up 50% in the last 5 years. That is an extraordinary increase. It was driven by school funding changes. But folks are not sitting, flush on cash here. We need to very, very responsibly solve this, knowing that, huge increases are going to be extraordinarily painful for the people of Jersey City.
Is there an area you could say right now that you have to cut?
So, healthcare was the first one, right? It's where the biggest money expenditures are. And I think we're able to do so in a way that actually keeps our benefits equal to or better because we're able to find basically network efficiencies by switching providers, more in-network doctors, significantly reduce costs. So that was step one.
Okay.
We're going to look at our debt service. We pay $79 million every year for debt service. But again, part of why we pay so much is we pay interest because we were bonding for things. We were putting it on a credit card. We pay for things we shouldn't be doing. And we're going to look at ending all those practices. So if you're a Jersey City resident, your tax dollars are being spent responsibly.
Another big topic happening this week was what we saw play out with those ICE agents showing up, carrying out raids, right? You spoke to us to make sure that, spoke out saying that all residents should know that they are safe within Jersey City and have rights. When you look at what that city council member had to do when he approached the agent, he said, "Can I see the warrant?" And the agent shut it down, saying you don't need to see the warrant. So how, when you see that kind of play out, how do you convince a Jersey City resident that their rights aren't going to be violated?
What I can say is that we in the city are going to have your back, and we're going to put pressure on the federal government to reverse course. My message to Donald Trump, to these ICE, with Secretary Noem, is spend the billions of dollars that you're giving to ICE on making life more affordable. Lower healthcare costs, lower housing costs. That would make all of us better. What they did on that raid on Sunday was just arrest people on their way to work. There's not people who have committed any crimes. They're just going to work. They've been members of our community for decades, and they have made Jersey City better.
Were those ICE agents, were they committing any sort of violation by being on that property?
No, not that I'm aware of. That was the public space of the light rail.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that violated any laws. But the practice is unconscionable. They were literally rounding people up who just happened to be there on their way to work. People who I said have been incredible members of our community.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your time this morning. A lot to talk about. We'll have you back soon, okay?